Hello and welcome to the brand new season of Mischief Makers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lanceley. I've been with the off-Broadway production of The Play That Goes Wrong since it opened in 2019, playing Chris Bean. This season of the Mischief Makers podcast will focus on the incredible 9 years and counting run of The Play That Goes Wrong here in New York City. And what better way to start this season than with our first guest, Kevin McCollum, the incredible producer who's brought you some of your favorite shows, Rent, In the Heights, Avenue Q, and of course, The Play That Goes Wrong. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and to having me, which is a new term, very mischievous when you are two-halved, which means I come in pieces. I'm not quite sure.
Well, let's hope not.
All right.
Well, my first question, I'm going to start kind of broad. How do you view your role and responsibilities as a producer in New York?
Well, The Play That Goes Wrong is a unique show for me because I typically work on shows from the very beginning, in the inception and the development, and I love the development process. But once in a while, there is a show that is just so special that I see somewhere around the world.
Right.
And it just hits me, right in my gut because I'm busting a gut. And when I saw the show, I didn't laugh a lot because I was doing the math of why it was so funny. And that happens a lot to me when I see something because I am listening to the psychology of the audience and the contract that is made.
Right.
So I just want to say that I have to give a lot of credit for whatever success we have in this country to Kenny and Mark, the original producers, and of course the Mischief company who grew up together, wrote together, went to school together. I'm sure they did many other things together. And as a result, created this wonderful, wonderful play that allows us to sort of reflect in the foibles of the human condition in the most classic theatrical way, which is falling on your face and theater against all odds, and the logic of that contract and that storytelling was just so compelling. I needed to do everything I could to be a partner and bring the show to America. And so what does a producer do in that situation? And we can talk about the differences, but in that situation, I really felt like I'm a Sherpa. I have this group of wonderfully, amazingly talented producers, designers, and artists.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get them all together and take them through this new territory and climb the highest peak there is in commercial theatrical landscape, the ridiculousness of Broadway.
Right.
At a time when comedy was a bit out of fashion. Many people who heard that I was looking at bringing the show here were like, it's so British. And I'm like, well, it's laughter, and I think laughter crosses every border. And I also think it, the Brits and the Americans like to say we're especially in the theater, we're cultures separated by a common language. But the one language that I think doesn't separate us is when we're laughing together. Right. And so I really feel in this one I'm a bit of a Sherpa, and I want to make sure no one dies in the frost of Broadway.
That's such a lovely way to talk about it. I'm curious, at what point in the show's development did you see it for the first time?
I had heard about it, and I was producing a musical called Something Rotten, and it was like 2015. And I was just going through, around this time of year, a Tony campaign. We had opened, and we were already sort of gone through a Tony sort of situation when we were planning what would happen. And I got this letter from Solt during the Olivier's of the same year, and the Olivier's, just happened. So the Olivier's happened in early April, and it was a week before the Olivier's, and it was this letter from the Mischief and Play That Goes Wrong to all the voters when I'm a voter, the Olivier's, and basically it was letters like, please do not vote for our show. It is a terrible show. We are embarrassed. You even have to waste your time. And I had heard about this show already, and I was figuring out when I could go see it. And I thought to myself, this is my sense of humor. Because I was doing something I had worked with the authors to call a musical Something Rotten. It was really called Shakespeare's Omelet. The authors first came up with that, and we were just sitting around working on the show. And I said, "What happens if could we get away with calling a musical Something Rotten?"
Yeah,
I mean it has a lot of confidence, and so I loved the confidence of the humor to disparage voting for them.
It's kind of the natural conclusion of that
And
joke.
I think the end of that story is they won. They won that year.
I imagine that helps.
Well, actually, the Olivier is helpful, but it's not a game changer, just like the Tonys are not a game changer for London.
Yeah.
Again, separated by a common language. It's a very interesting dynamic between the two territories when you're producing in both territories. How one award might be much more important in a certain territory.
Yeah.
And the Oliviers are important, but the Tonys really do move the needle from an economic standpoint.
When you're watching a show, do you watch it as a patron or do you watch it as a producer?
I think one of the things one of the things I think that is perhaps separates me a little bit, because I used to be a performer and I used to write lyrics and I have an artist's heart. And so I know the creative process and I'm comfortable. Right. I've always looked at, sort of money as a tool. And the families you build is the destination. So this also is a show about, in the fiction of the show, this amateur theater company, and yet the nonfiction is that this is a theater company that grew up together doing a show about a fictitious amateur theater company, and I loved that. I loved that dynamic. And I always want to be a part of those groups, from when I was a performer, and I still have that, deep in my soul. So I go to have a good time. I go to be surprised. And when I see a show that I see the contract is made with the audience, and then the audience feels safe, which is really so important in any musical or plays. Like, does the audience feel that they're in good hands, that their time is not going to be wasted? And they usually form that opinion within the first, 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And the pre-show, which was great, which all of a sudden they're comfortable with the audience. You're seeing they're doing this for the first time, even though it's routined probably in 12 different ways. It comes from improv, but yet nothing could be better thought out or planned. I just loved it. And so I'm a fan, but I'm also have to be economically rigorous on how you take care of not only protecting the authors who would give you their copyright to figure out how they can make a living in their sleep in London while they give you the show to figure out how to produce in this territory, but also how I also take care of the theater and all the other stakeholders when you do a Broadway show.
Is it a challenge to find investors or find other partners when you're pushing a show that is designed to be a failure?
Yes, I think I'm all about differentiation. So if I can explain to an investor or myself, because I'm usually the first investor, what people don't know is producers have to usually put a lot of money up front before they've even created the paperwork to go and find their investors. So what happens is I have to first decide, is this something I can talk about in a way that why I got excited?
Yeah.
And then it's easy. I always say, money is a tool, people are the destination. So if I can say we need this tool to make this happen, and I'm putting up this much money, and I always have some money in my shows, or it's very hard to raise money, and I'm surprised when people don't have any money in the shows they produce, and that happens less and less because the real producers who last usually have some of their money, even though the conventional wisdom is other people's money. Yeah. But to get other people's money in today's world, people want to know. And it's all very transparent, it's just security, so you have to disclose, and the list of investors are there. So you can't pretend you have money in a show you don't have money in.
Yeah.
So I find if I can tell the story of why I'm telling the story, and create the philosophy, then the money is just, it's there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you have found clearly the key to making a show last.
Yeah, I mean, I came from booking. I was an actor, but then I started a company called the Booking Office. It's now called the Booking Group. I'm still a part of it. But what is interesting, it comes from distribution. And I always said, if you're going to make it once, you better figure out if it works, then what do you do? And producing isn't like, I'm just going to produce the show. No, people are relying on you to have a plan so that it has a life beyond its initial production. Yeah. And that's also what I think about, and I have a history of doing that because I've just lived it since I was, basically 28 years old.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially a startup, kind of, whenever you...
Every show is a startup, and you're trying to make a cottage industry out of it. Absolutely.
Right. And as it years go by on a show, how does your role shift as the producer?
I think the hardest thing, it doesn't really, Broadway, the commercial theater, just opening a show on Broadway, and off-Broadway is similar with a little less, a little less of a Rubik's Cube with, Broadway is like 16 unions or 16 union contracts with 15 different unions. Yeah. And off Broadway, you might have 5 unions.
Right.
It's a little different. And therefore, I'm not anti-union at all. I'm anti-inefficiency. So therefore, the work rules are a little easier and a little looser off Broadway. And your crew might be 11 or 12, 13 on Broadway, which is a typical crew of even a play. And then off Broadway, you might have a crew of 4. And therefore your ticket price can come down. Unfortunately, people are paid less because we have less seats to sell. So my role doesn't really change in just monitoring that and making sure the show can stay open and planning how we advertise and making sure we understand the trends. Like, we know the holidays are usually very, very buoyant for the industry, and February, can be bleak except for Valentine's Day, and Easter's tough, and we're now ramping up into a time that Broadway is going to get a little frothy because the season has ended. We're right now sitting, at the end of April, and we're going into the Tony push of 2026. So people are now going to write and pay attention to the shows. So that the raps will come up. So you're constantly monitoring that. But the stronger Broadway is, sometimes the weaker off-Broadway is, because a lot of attention is now going to the Tonys. So this is now a quieter time in off-Broadway, even though I like to say where The Play That Goes Wrong is now playing, we are Broadway adjacent. We are just off 8th Avenue. And, we ran 2 years on Broadway, and then, we moved to, as you know, to the New World Stages, and we haven't stopped since.
No, it's been fantastic. I mean, and at what point during that Broadway run do you think this can have a life elsewhere? This can work in a smaller space with a smaller crew and all of that situation?
I always say I'm not really a Broadway producer.
Yeah.
I'm a producer, and some of the shows I get involved with go to Broadway.
Right.
So Broadway is just another platform of live storytelling. So, we could have a situation where, when I saw the show at the Duchess in London, there's 400 seats. It's fascinating that actually off Broadway we have 399, and so we're basically the same size as the venue in London. Yeah. Our economics are a little more expensive, of course, but and they've enjoyed 10 years, and they're the original production, and but it's the same role whether it's Broadway or off Broadway. As a producer, you just have to keep it going. The hardest thing for me actually is on long running shows when people come in and out, is remembering the names. And that really gives me great anxiety. Yeah. Because it's like, I'm a producer, I care about and it's like, I just, my brain also, at my age now of 64, I mean, when I was producing Rent and we had, 5 companies around the world at one moment, it was, I prided myself, I knew everyone's name. That would be almost an impossible task right now. Yeah. And that's just what happens. But that is the sad thing, because it's hard to be everywhere. Yeah. So success has its own, causes certain anxiety if you can't be as hands-on as you like to be. And I think, again, I like being in the room and making sure everyone is sort of nurtured in a way of, you got to show up for each other. That's the great thing about our business.
Yeah.
Because it's fragile, and if you're a producer who doesn't show up, things can fall apart pretty quickly.
Right. And it is a family over there off Broadway in our New World Stages home. We have a WhatsApp group of all of the alumni of the show that just keeps growing year on year. It's been great to be there personally for those 7.5 years with that and meet such wonderful people throughout.
Well, you are the Deuteronomy of old Deuteronomy of
Yes.
Of the show.
Yeah,
It's
increasingly weird to me that I've been there so long.
But at the same time, it's the kind of show that and again, I don't want to speak for you, but everyone has played the role because the contract is with the audience, and the audience is
totally
a new personality each and every performance.
Yeah.
You're actually interacting with the audience in a way where you are truly in dialogue creatively.
Yeah.
And that's, when I was a performer, I used to love improv, and I used to love, breaking the fourth wall. Mm-hmm. And we break a lot of things in the show, and the fourth wall is one of them, which again is the kind of show that you can come to again and again, and it's a different experience. So for the listeners, if you've seen it once, see it in another territory, see it again. Every performance is unique.
Yeah, it's amazing that you say this is a show that where the audience feels safe, and it is. It absolutely is that pre-show, and it's remarkable that the audience can feel safe despite the fact that a character breaks the fourth wall and screams at them halfway through the show.
Yes.
Yet everyone's laughing at it and enjoying it, and it's just, I think it's a real testament to what the piece is.
I like to say what Mischief Company has done so beautifully, all of them, not only the writers, but those who created the foundation of the first company. They truly love working without a net. Mm. And there's a generosity of spirit, and they show the bones.
Yeah.
They show, it's like Penn and Teller, who are great magicians. They love to show you how the trick works, and then you're still amazed.
Yeah.
That's what I love. You really can show the bones on this. These are people just trying to tell a story against all odds, and everything's going wrong. And whether you're someone who's just trying to drop, your kids off at daycare or buy a bagel in a crowded bodega, it's like, why does everything have to be so hard?
Yeah.
And I think that's what this show celebrates. It's that vulnerability that we all share of trying to get through our day, as a metaphor and literally in a play about just trying to tell a murder mystery.
Yeah. You find the audience is rooting for you. As long as there's life in these characters and personalities and something to root for, that's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, exactly. And, I will also say, when I saw the show, I did tell, Mischief and the whole team, there's a couple of tweaks I want to make for America. And they felt they didn't resist, but in that British way, they made me feel like they were listening to me.
Yeah.
And then in
I've not been listening this whole time.
Oh, please. And I know that you're not really British, that you're just from Connecticut, and that's an accent that you use to get work. So
not very effective, as it turns out.
No, clearly you've had one gig for 7.5 years. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Now, are we going to talk about the career that went wrong with you? Is that what we're doing
I don't
now?
audition well.
Yeah, no, it's not true. You're amazing, Chris. So there was a couple of logical things where I said, I know the British music hall tradition is you can just kind of do something silly, for silliness. And because the British culture grew up on murder mysteries, Americans, we don't have that as much as a format. So we don't know the rules of a murder mystery structure. So if you just do something silly in a place that's just silly and it's not rooted to the logic of trying to tell the story of the play, the Americans are amused, they're not as engaged. So there was a couple of moments where I felt there needed to be just a more logical reason of why something was happening, especially if the character of Chris Bean is trying to get through the show.
Right.
And we found those, and it was great to work with them early on those.
It's interesting you say that, because what I found in the 7 years of playing the role and others in the show is that making it as honest and real and as genuine as possible, and really trying to dedicate yourself to the murder mystery as much as possible and get back to that as quickly
on track
is where the show finds the most success with the audience.
Because we know the contract. You're trying to you say we are going to do this play, and then things happen through just out of their control, and so a character facing a tough situation, or a character just being, and I'll use the word stupid about something, it's not as effective if it's just they're dumb.
Right.
It has to be their misunderstanding the situation at all times. But there's a logic. And that's the brilliance of the Mischief comedy. There's logic under the comedy.
Totally.
And I'll just say, because I also produced Peter Pan Goes Wrong here, that show was easier to be silly for sillier sake because we know the Peter Pan story. We know the A to B much better than we know a murder mystery A to B.
And I imagine Christmas Carol, which is heading to the Almonds.
Yes, and that's a very different incarnation too. Yeah. I think that's what I love about Mischief too. For anyone who's a fan of the Mischief world, as creators are always trying to reinvent what they've done before. They're not trying to do the same show again, just with a different title. So that's what I really admire about them.
So I'm going to push the break in a couple of moments, but I have a repeated question. That, I have a mischievous question that I'm going to be asking everybody that I interview. And your mischievous question is, would you rather have the original 1996 cast of Rent perform The Play That Goes Wrong, or the original 2017 Broadway cast of The Play That Goes Wrong perform Rent, and why?
I'd like to leave the building for both of those. No, I think, listen, I think either could be kind of amazing, but I think probably the original company doing Mischief would be probably the right casting. Yeah. I don't think there's, I don't know, I guess Sandra would have to play Maureen and also play Mimi and Joanna. I mean, it would be a lot. It would be mischievous either way. It would be. But Rent is such a just sort of a touchstone of sort of how we moved, I think, the musical theater form forward a little bit, and that's what I always try to do. And I will say that the emotional truths are important to tell any story well. So, but I think if you've been in Rent for a while, it might be great to have a few laughs and fall down a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to start with a question. J.J. Abrams, how on earth did that happen?
Well, clearly he lost a bet.
Yeah.
And he had to do this, I guess.
The only thing you can imagine.
No, actually, when I first got that letter when I talked earlier about please don't vote for us, I got a call from CAA the next day for some reason. And I thought it was about an actor and something rotten or something, and the agent said, do you know J.J. Abrams? And I went, yes. He goes, well, there's a play in London called, The Play That Goes Wrong. He really likes, and he'd like to do it, but he's also the kind of guy who knows that, he's doing a lot of film and television, and he's loved theater, and, he asked us who he should talk to who might be a good partner for him in the theater. And your name came up, and I went, oh, well, I'm very flattered, and I asked, I said, so what did he see? And they said, The Play That Goes Wrong. I said, it's funny, I'm scheduled to go and see it.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, he saw it, and I said, well, I'm going to go next week. So let me go, and I'll call you. I'll call you back and tell you what I think. So I went, and I loved it, as you know. So I called the agent back, and I said, yeah, if JJ wants to talk, let's talk. And I had also spoken to Kenny Wax when I went over to see it, because I'd known Kenny, and I had been, I called him, so he kind of knew who I was and my interest, and it was very, very special. He's an amazing guy, and he runs a big operation, and especially at that time, there was so much going on in his world, and we decided, okay, let's do this play together and see what happens. So we made an arrangement, and the authors were thrilled, Kenny and Mark were thrilled, and we said, okay, Will shepherded it here, and we immediately started talking about it. He agreed with my notes, and he had some great notes as well along the similar manner, like, we don't know murder mysteries, we have to really do this. And he's a lover of theater, which makes him a great producer of theater, because he's not someone from Hollywood who just wants to say, I'm also a Broadway producer.
Yeah.
No, he grew up going to the theater, loving it, and knows his stuff. So that was just fantastic. And we made the arrangement, and the funny thing was we did do a press conference, and we did joke about, and I'd like to introduce J.J. Abrams, who clearly lost a bet, and we played that out that actually he did,
Right.
He owed me some money, and so he had to do it or something. I can't remember exactly, but we just played with the public about it, and it put us on the map. But it wasn't enough because no producer sells a show. There's been a lot of very famous people above the title. The two things JJ did that a lot of those people don't is that he actually worked on the show. He helped us cut our commercial. He had a lot to say about our advertising, and he spent a lot of time with the authors, just as a person, going out to dinner, getting to know them. He didn't helicopter in. He was really in the trenches with us, and it was great. And we're friends to this day. And he's a big fan of Mischief. So it was a serendipitous and real relationship that we share to this day.
It sounds like a great foundation for a relationship, that a shared passion and love, but he knew he didn't know what he didn't know.
Yeah.
And he knew that a Sherpa like you could...
I'm a Sherpa.
Could kind of fill that void for him.
Right. Listen, if I was making a movie, he'd be the guy I'd call.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I mean, one thing that we deal with on a daily basis at the Play That Goes Wrong is the kind of degradation of the set, and cast turnover and crew turnover. As you continue your journey with this show, is that something that you, as a producer, kind of manage as well?
You try. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but we did win a Tony Award for the show, and it was for Best Set.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, ever since you're going to exactly where I was going. Ever since the set won, she's been very hard to work with. I mean, lazy. I mean, everything. She's always breaking, and and it's like,
resting on a success.
Before a Tony, she would be, I'm fine. You don't need to polish me. And now it's like, oh, we have to polish her. It's like, nothing worse than a set with an agent.
Right.
But I jest. But that's the hardest thing. I mean, in producing, just like anything, if you run your home or anything. It's never free. You always have to say, okay, you have to pay for everybody and all that, but then you also have to put an accrual aside that your floor is going to last X amount of years. Yeah. That hinge is going to, have to be looked at. And there's a lot of safety issues because things do go wrong. Nobody has died, but injury is always possible. And if you're lazy or there's a prop that there's an edge that didn't get sanded right or anything like that, because it's a game of inches and sometimes millimeters. We're throwing things at each other, we're slipping, we're falling, and we just have to make sure no one perishes during the show. That's really the producer's job. Yeah. And again, the Sherpa, no one dies, and of course, I'm being hyperbolic here.
Right.
But when I say dies, I mean, when someone gets their thumb jammed, we go back and like, okay, what happened there?
Yeah.
Was that the actor error, or is there something on the set that is not in place? And that has to be constantly repaired.
It's interesting because, you're talking about predicting the unpredictability by putting money aside and being aware that certain things will last a certain amount of time. My question, I suppose, like what I'm moving on to, I was always, your knowledge seems to be quite granular of what the set is and all these things. And I was wondering, I've always imagined there's a threshold where people go, oh, we got to call Kevin on this one.
Well, it's wonderful. The team, first of all, it doesn't call me a lot on that. Carl White, who is our current general manager, we've had 3 different chapters of different general managers just as the show has evolved from Broadway to touring to off-Broadway. And you can't work on a show without understanding how to read plans and drawings and how it works in the theater and how HVAC works. I mean, what a lot of audiences don't know, if you have a curtain and you have the wrong HVAC setting, all of a sudden that curtain doesn't raise correctly or falls into, can get on a piece of furniture and rip. And it's you're really creating an environment where safety first. So it's very similar. Before we start a show, we'll come in and we'll make sure, oftentimes we have work calls every week where we tighten all the lights and all that, because we have a show where lights do fall down, but that's on purpose. But we have to make sure that the actual rig is solid. And we spend a lot of time on that before and after. And there's always a continuity call after where things have to be cleaned up. And the set has to be made sure that the set didn't get damaged during the show about a set being damaged. So there's a lot of diligence, and you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's very reassuring on my end.
Yes, absolutely.
I was wondering, I've noticed this from my perspective on stage. It seems like the release of the script to schools and to the public has had a really positive impact on attendance to the show.
I think so. I'm a great believer. You know, we don't come into your living room for free like television. And even though if you pay cable, it's not free, but you don't have to do anything. Things can be delivered to you for film and television, and they become popular. There was a conventional wisdom when I was starting producing in the early 90s, late 80s, where, you know, you got to do the Broadway thing and then don't release anything until you've finished. And I, as a theater kid growing up, and I was born in Hawaii, we never got the tours. So we would get the rights released to, I went to Punahou, which is a school. Actually, I went to school with Barack Obama. He was a year ahead of me. Yeah, we were on 5th and 6th grade student council.
Oh, great.
He did well there.
I'm sure.
And for a 6th grader, he was pretty on it. I really felt as a kid growing up in Hawaii, we'd hear about a show on Broadway, there'd be an album that would get to us, and then it would be the next season at the college or the high school, because they've got to release it to Hawaii, no one's going. So what we did with Mischief first in this country, and we also did it with Six, another show I did with Kenny Wax, is, you know, we released, you know, high school and colleges first. And then after we left Broadway, we've also had, you know, regional productions and things, because we can do the what we call the replica production, which is the original production with all the bells and whistles. A lot of the other theaters can't, and so they might come in touch with it and love it or see it, but then want to see the actual replica production of the original. And that's really special what we have at New World Stages.
Totally.
And also on the West End. Yeah.
It's a story I hear times. You know, people will be at the stage door telling us, "Oh, I played Chris and I played Sam," and it's, "Oh, brilliant!" And they'll show us pictures of them, which has been all over our social media as well. Pictures from other people's productions all over the country. It's brilliant.
Well, I think this is the other thing about this show, and about Mischief, and why we have a podcast. There is such a generosity of spirit from the artists that created these plays, because they were kids in school just wanting to put on shows and be with their friends. So that ethic is a part of The Play That Goes Wrong. Because when you make something with your friends, it's an expression of love, and it also makes you feel safe that you belong to something bigger than yourself in the world. And all of us who go to the theater and love the theater, I think the magic of the theater is that we are involved in an art form that evaporates the moment you make it. And we are choosing to use our treasure. And the most important treasure is not money, it's time. So when you are a young person learning about how to put a show together and make people laugh and get a reaction, you are actually connecting in a time of a lot of division. And I think it's one of the reasons why the play gets stronger and stronger. One of the reasons is a very unfortunate reason, that people miss being together, feeling safe, and laughing, no matter where they come from, no matter what their political point of view is. They are all human beings trying to figure out what this life is in an art form that evaporates while you're living your life. And that is not lost on me, and it keeps me very tethered to the ground and very humbled and grateful that I get to toil in the short time I have on this planet in something that is created and leaves immediately. So we all die a little every time we do the show, but we also breathe so much life into the time while we're dying.
It's interesting. My final question to you is going to be what you see as the Goes Wrong brand's greatest contribution to the New York theater landscape. And I'm not sure if you just answered it with that previous question.
Don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
We are all only here for so long, and you can't hold on to it. But what you can hold on to while you're breathing is the memory of a great laugh with strangers that then become a family.
Yeah.
That's what's so wonderfully delicious and mischievous.
I think that goes for all of us backstage as well. We laugh together. We laugh on stage, not all the time, hopefully, as Chris Bean, but we really have become a family, and the show is kind of what brought us together. It's lovely. Finally, it's kind of my final thought. You see yourself as a Sherpa in the kind of theater world, but I really want to kind of herald your role as a job creator as well. In the 9+ years this show has been here, so many people have felt security in their career that they hadn't felt before. I know I am one of those people who has felt that. In the last 7.5 years that I've been with the show, I've been able to feel safe enough to start a family, to buy an apartment out in Queens. I've had consistent health insurance. I've saved for retirement. All of these things that I wouldn't have been able to do without such a consistent, long-running job in my life. So I suppose a Sherpa would kind of fit that role, but you provide safety to people that may not otherwise have had it through your gift of finding a hit and that longevity in a show and maintaining that through the years. So, thank you for doing this podcast with me, but also thank you for that.
Well, thank you. But I also want to point out, none of that happens unless you say, I'm going to devote my life to trying to change other people's lives. And that's what you do. And my job is to give you an environment to show the world your talent and have your talent continue to grow. So my friend, you found me because of you and your talent and your gifts. And it's a pleasure to be able to provide a space where those gifts can be shown to an audience, but also to yourself, and for you to grow and for us to grow together as we continue to figure out how to tell these stories in real time.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for joining me
today.
Thank you. Join us for the rest of the season of Mischief Makers podcast as we explore the incredible 9 years and hopefully more of the play that goes wrong here in New York City. Lots of exciting episodes to come. Once again, thanks, Kevin, and I'll see the rest of you soon.